see the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Unites people. Armies, gold, flags, stories. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it.
If you want to stand out from everybody else, you need to get into storytelling.
Draw a different frame around the same set of circumstances and new pathways come into view.
Welcome to Artefact Live with me, Scott MacArthur, where we look at the art and science of story. We don't care who you are, whether you're a bricklayer, a professor or a speaker, all we care about is you being a good storyteller.
Thank God the drummers arrived.
It's time to realise that facts tell, but it's stories that sell.
Get me some nasty and get it now or someone's getting shot.
And that's a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche. 1,000 comments.
Selling a hemorrhoid cream to someone who's got hemorrhoids.
Got a whip.
I was born into a deep contradiction.
This stuff's magic.
Oh, that's so clever.
Good afternoon and welcome to Artefact Live with me, Scott MacArthur.
And me, Paul Crick. Hello.
How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm kind of I'm feeling a bit buzzed. I think I've had 5 double espressos this morning, Paul. So I'm a bit, drink coffee to the point of shaking. And I've been quite busy, so yeah, quite good. I've been I've got an all-day in-person event tomorrow, believe it or not.
No, fantastic.
I don't, how's your stuff going? Are you starting to see a pick up, or is it still?
Yeah, I'm getting out and about,
Yeah.
which is great. I'm enjoying that. Been down to London, caught up with. Actually, I've now decided that I am no longer having client meetings anywhere dull like a conference room.
Right.
Because we ended up at the Tate Modern.
Yes.
And we wandered round Tate. It was brilliant because I smashed my 10,000 steps target by a gazillion miles. I looked at it and I went, I've walked 10 miles today. My God, no wonder my legs hurt. But it was just brilliant to catch up with a colleague who I've known for, must be 20 years now. And he suggested it. And we just had a brilliant time going around there. The Surrealism exhibition, which, by the way, if you're in London or in the UK and you've not seen it, my, go see it. If you want to see real disruption, you want to know what real disruption looks like, that'll terrify you. It's fantastic.
I'll tell you what, you know what we should do? We should try and get some of these artists on the show.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a good, I think that's good.
Because the way they tell story is different, as you suggest, to a lot of people, isn't it? It's like, when you get a really creative musician on the show, they tell a story and you go, really? And I think there's a lot that can be learnt from that sort of thing. So,
well, it just really is a true sideways look at the world and how we think. And I think, the much misquoted Einstein thing of, we need a different level of thinking to get us out of where we got to. I mean, they were thinkers. They really, some of it's not comfortable to be around or watch. But I'll give you an example. There's a thing called the Tower of Babel, which is this room, and this guy has stacked radios in what looks like the leaning tower of Pisa. Only it's not leaning; it's upright, and it's in a circle, and all of them are powered, and they're all broadcasting on different channels. And different voices, and it changes all the time because obviously the programs change so you've got the movement from the old radiogram all the way up to the modern sort of iPhone
Oh, right.
at the top of the tower, and you move all the way around, and it's all different sounds and voices, and it's fantastic idea the way this guy's done it. Anyhow, can't recommend it more highly. It's there you go. That's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah, that
stunning.
is cool, actually, isn't it? What a good
Yeah,
idea.
it's an unbelievably good idea,
Yeah.
and just I think I love the way artists tell stories through whatever medium it is that they choose to
Yes.
tell that, because it makes us look at the world differently. So I resolved that I would do that. So my next trip to London is next week, actually. So I'm hoping to land a meeting at the Science Museum.
What a lovely idea. I love
I,
it.
I think everyone should do that. I think everyone should get outside, and if the weather's nice, go for a walk. Go for a walk in the woods. Have a meeting in the woods.
It's funny. I'm working as a Ned for a talent company just now. I don't know if I've told you about this. I don't think I have, but it's up in Scotland.
Okay.
So I go up every month, and I was taught something along these lines many years ago by a guy called John. And I went up, and the first thing I said to the chief executive, I said, right, I'll meet you at the door. And he was like, I said, I'll meet you at the door. So he came out and I said, right, let's go for a walk. And you should have seen his face. He was like, oh, nobody had ever asked him just to go for a walk, you know? And I believe he's been taking his staff for walks.
Good. Well, that's a good thing.
Isn't that cool?
Well, it's great. I highly recommend it. Move.
Yeah.
Move changes the biochemistry in the body.
Exactly,
It changes
yeah.
the mood. You know,
Yeah.
if you get out in trees, the terpenes that come out of the trees strengthen your immune system, all those good things. And it's just good for you, as opposed to being sedentary for sort of like 6 hours in a 3-hour conference call or meeting or whatever.
Oh, gosh. What is it? Forest bathing, they call that, isn't it?
That's right, yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done it. I promise you. We did it. We went up to Skipton, to Broughton Hall, which is 3,000 acres, this estate that's been around for hundreds of years. And they're doing all sorts of things with it. They're rewilding. There's what you and I might call a spa, but it's really not. And they've got a restaurant that does healthy, locally grown food, typically vegetarian, vegan style dishes. And we did that. And you just enter into the woods, and I was like, oh, what's this? You know, I've read about it. Really? I promise you, once you've done it for a couple of hours, you'll never look at the world the same way.
Oh, I love that.
You just pay attention to things that I sat there. People listening to this probably think I'm a bit loopy, but I don't care. I sat by a stream, and all of a sudden you just sit observing it, and you go, well, the logs are laid that way, and everything, the way the system's working, and it's working perfectly, and I'm not interfering with it, and it's the way, and actually I'm part of it because I'm observing it. And you just go into deep thoughts like that, and it's definitely worth it.
Fantastic. Yeah, you know, we should do a show from a forest one day.
I think that's a tremendous idea.
Oh, what a good idea. Right. Gosh, that'd be lovely.
Yeah.
Well,
I know. Where's the place down near you? But is it Puzzlewood?
Yes.
I know you've got a book to get in there, but it's been used in all sorts, like Merlin.
I'm taking a note of that.
Yeah, because it's just photogenically, it's just fantastic.
Right.
And Tina and I have been planning to get down there, but haven't managed it yet.
Well, maybe this is an excuse.
It's a great excuse.
We have the technology, don't we? So we could do it. We could do it. That takes neatly sits with something that both of us have been steeped in for probably at least 20 years, a long time. And that's the subject for today. And it's the word sales. Now that used to scare the shit out of me, right? If I'm absolutely honest, because it was like, certainly in big consulting, you know, you've been there, you were in it longer than I was. It is the only thing that matters, at least up until the pandemic. Is that how you felt about it, or did you see it differently, or how did you see sales?
No, well, you know, if you're not selling, if you're not signing, then you're not delivering and growing revenue. So, you know, it's the essential lifeblood of any business. You've got no sales, you've got no business. So,
yes,
no different in the consulting business.
Yes, I think it was like a bit like a concentrated juice, though, because we had to do, you went, certainly in my experience, I was doing, 1 week you'd be doing a procurement bid, the next week you'd be doing an Oracle bid, the following week you'd be doing, and it would go on and on and on and on. And then you would have the mega bids above that you'd be doing for a year and a half, all at the same time as delivering to clients. So I don't know how you cope with it, but I always found it was always a little bit of a niggle at the back of my head all the time, because I was trying to focus on the client, but the partners were always saying, what's happening over there? Another client. And I was going, well, wait a minute, I'm trying to help the client here. I
Well,
don't know if
they've got different reward systems.
Yeah.
So the reward systems tend to drive behavior, and if you're rewarded on signings, then you're going to go after signings rather than after client satisfaction measures. So I think that's understandable. I think some of the interesting distinctions are working sales in public sector is very, very different from working sales in private sector.
Absolutely.
So I remember being involved in one thing, which was actually a resubmission of the Catalyst to be included in the Catalyst framework, which in the UK is the UK government, or was the UK procurement government framework that was used to determine whether you were actually on the list of an approved suppliers. And I'll be honest, poking my eyes out with hot pins would have been preferable.
You didn't time that very well. I almost splat all over my...
Well, it's the thing of the thing that always amuses me. It's tell us about your capability in XYZ, but do it in 20 words. We're all running around scratching our heads, going, "How the hell do we do this?" And then trying hard not to repeat ourselves when it asks a very similar question in another section further down the road. So it's a peculiar thing that once you get used to it, you either start to enjoy it and play the game, or you go, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yes. I think that's a really interesting observation. That, I mean, I enjoyed the winning.
Oh, everyone enjoys the winning.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy the losing, particularly when you were down to the last two. It was like being on, Britain's Got Talent, and getting to the final and getting beaten in the fight by a whistling dog or something, and you're like,
Yeah. Well, there's all sorts of games that goes on, isn't there? There's all kinds of gamesmanship from our side of the fence in terms of the people pitching. I remember one, and there's games on the other side of the fence. It's the client. They've got favourites, but they can't have favourites, or they say they have certain requirements, but actually they don't really. All those kinds of things that you start to get wise to as you develop scars on your body from failed attempts to convince people to buy your project or skills. Absolutely. Or people.
There's a reason why. Well, one of the reasons I started this podcast, Paul, was that I didn't talk about storytelling before. I just told stories. I've gone from one side to the other, if you like. But and how I got to that point was from these experiences, because, and I mean, I know it's simplistic, and I talk about facts tell, stories sell.
Yeah, sure.
And I know that's simplistic. I appreciate that, but the reason I came to that conclusion was through a number of multiple experiences of actually working in that sales environment and noticing the little things that tend. It's a bit like sport, and I know you're interested in this as well. It's the tiny things that makes a difference. Everybody can get, Accenture, Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, Atos, Fujitsu. They're all the same people. They just move around. They're all the same. So it's the tiny little differences that make the difference. I
think that's true. Have you got an example of that?
Sense?
Have you got a good example of that where it's worked, and a good example of maybe where it hasn't worked quite as it was intended?
Well, the bad one, and this was terrible. I mean, my very, very first sale in consulting, I had been working on a massive military project in Bath called Procurement Reform. And it was literally a life job. It was 3 years, and it was a proper job. You were there for years. And we were I mean, it's astonishing. I mean, the one thing, and again, it's a story, but it's very short. But we were saving the Ministry of Defence enough money a day, and that's not a mistake, a day to build a new primary school.
Good Lord.
That was how successful that program was, right? So we all left with an incredible reputation. We had this, what consulting firms are like. We had this dinner, and there was a Frank Sinatra and a Marilyn Monroe, and there was people taking photographs of us on a red carpet. You name it. There was Snake Charmers, there was Moulin Rouge. You couldn't make it up. There was caricature people. Everything you can imagine was there. And then, of course, you've been institutionalized in effect, and you're chucked out. So I got chucked out, and I was what they called an executive consultant, which is a sort of mid-level consultant. But because I was nudging towards what they call a principal, which is a senior consultant, they gave me a job of getting out and trying to sell something. Now, I had no idea what I was doing, but very lucky, just pure luck, I managed to sell some strategy work to Marks and Spencer's, and bugger me, it went really, really well. We really got on, and it was a super project. It was. I didn't sell it. It was someone else sold it. Sorry, someone else sold it.
Yeah.
And it was about 70,000 quid or something. So it was a small project, but it went so well that I managed to sell on some organizational design stuff. And that was my first sale. And it was about 150 grand or something. Anyway, I was in there for 2 or 3 months, maybe, with another guy called Matt, and who I'd like us to interview sometime. Matt Fairbrass is his name. And so I then got a nod and a wink from the client saying, with this massive system requirement, would love you to bid for it, Scott. And she was like, how clients do that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, excellent, here we go, And so we did all the work. But remember, I was still a mid-ranking consultant. So we developed the pack, which is basically the slide where you take to the pitch. We did all the due diligence, all the usual boring stuff. But it came to the pitch, which is when you go and meet the client and say, look, this is how we're going to do it, etc. Who's going to do it, all the usual stuff. And we went in, and the client was briefing me in the background. I mean, she was brilliant. She's now HR director at one of the big retail companies, the other big retail company. She's a very senior person. Sarah's her name. And walked in, and I had one of the managing partners with me, who I won't name. No. Because, well, you'll know why in a minute. And we sat down, and I had rehearsed up the yin-yang, what I was going to say, right? And because I was getting coached by the client, I knew that we had a better than 70% chance. It would probably go down to commodities, so cost. That would be the only way we'd lose it. We wouldn't lose it on technical capability. And I was literally, I'm egging this a little bit, I was literally about to go, and this man started speaking about how important he was. 45 minutes later, he stopped.
Oh dear.
I had 5 minutes, right? And I'd prepared to speak for half an hour.
Okay.
So I couldn't, I couldn't. I mean, I wasn't, if it happened to me now, maybe I could get my way through, bullshit my way through it effectively and get to the point where they were still impressed. But I didn't. I didn't know what I was doing. It was my first big pitch. So we didn't get the work. Client was absolutely livid.
Oh dear.
She went bizarre. I thought she was going to. I was expecting the police to come and get me for breaking a friendship. It was that bad. It was like, I've so fucked up here that it's just a nightmare. So that's the worst one. So I did have stories that were ready. We had the data. We were ready. But even before I got to tell my story, so it was like Jack and Ori, but suddenly it was Magpie. I just didn't get to do what I had planned to do. Learned a big lesson that day, Paul.
Yeah. I remember there was some training that was really good, actually, that I did in my stint at Capgemini, and they literally trained you in the art of giving presentations. And the thing I loved about it was they trained you to respond to exactly that kind of thing. So what are you going to do if the projector doesn't work? We hadn't thought of that. What do you do if one client comes in and you're expecting to meet 3 and you only meet 2, and then one of them has to leave, but you're aiming to get a decision out of them in that day? How do you handle that? Or someone says, well, I know we said we do an hour, but actually I've only got 10 minutes. And all those kinds of things that
Yes.
helped you with the failure points. So never managed to anticipate them all, because every consultant's got a good war story about how things didn't go according to plan. But but yeah, that was pretty good actually in terms of what they did, because that's kind of sets you up and go, okay, think about what could go wrong, and then how do you prepare for it.
I'll tell you a story how I got into that, because that's very well put, and Capgemini are good at that, still good at that sort of thing. I remember one of my mentors is called Jim, and I think he might even be watching actually. Hello, Jim, because he's just posted something. So hello, Jim. I was head of HR at Scottish Courage, which was Scottish Newcastle, and we were based in Manchester. At what was called then the Royal Brewery. So we did like Kronenberg and Foster's, and we were actually the emergency Guinness factory as well, which people don't know about, but these things happen all the time in that industry. So anyway, I the manufacturer, believe it or not, I reported to the manufacturing director, which is quite unusual for an senior HR person to report to but I was. His name was Al, and Al used to give us all these odd projects to do, Paul. So he would say to the marketing director, right, I want you to do a finance job, or he would say to the finance director, right, I want you to do an HR job, So I was given this job of basically, I mean, the most expensive thing in making beer is water, right? So your water supply is where you can shave off, because the margins are tiny, and you shave off little parts of percentage points. And I was given the job to put a presentation together to go to this guy. The great job title, it was called God, Global Operations Director. And Steve was a great guy. I didn't know him at the time. But anyway, he came to see me to talk about this water thing. And unfortunately, because I was daft, I was only 26 or something. I had no idea what I was doing. And behind me, I had a massive office. It fitted my ego at the time. It was a huge office. But I had a picture of me with my long hair, my Iron Maiden t-shirt on, and a leather jacket outside Tynecastle Park, which is, I'm a Hearts fan. And Steve spotted it. God spotted it, and he went, you're a Hearts fan. And we spoke for about 25 minutes about football. He was a Celtic fan. He's another Scotsman. Now, that's a good thing, getting rapport with somebody that senior. I mean, there was no issue with that, really. But the problem was, God doesn't turn up very often in the breweries. So I'd basically buggered up because I hadn't spoken to him about the water plant. So my boss went ballistic. I went home with my tail between my legs. I spoke to my other half and I said, I fucked up. And she said, well, phone Jim. Jim, if you're there, let me know if you remember this. And Jim said, he's a bugger, Jim. He just said, he went, next time, Scott. He's got a very gentle Glasgow accent. Believe it or not, there are gentle Glasgow accents. He went, next time, Scott, you need to polish your shoes. And I was like, he's dropped an acid. What is he doing here? I had no idea what he was talking about. Turns out what he was talking about was, you need to prepare. You need to absolutely prepare for these meetings. And it ties in quite beautifully with what you just said earlier, because what we did then, there was a girl who worked for me. She was a lady, sorry. The woman who worked for me, she was my HR business partner. She was much better at HR than I was. But we sat down and we planned, because we got a note from Al saying God's coming back by pure fluke in 2 weeks' time, right?
Yeah.
So did we prepare for the second coming? I mean, honestly, every inch we went, I called it full on Darren Brown. We literally thought about when he first came into the brewery, what was on the walls, what was on the notice boards, what was in the lift, what was in my office. And she sat there and she went through the proposal and she highlighted, these little arrow post-its she gets. So she put them in, she summarized it. And, and when he sat down, I'd moved away my picture, but I put it in another corner because it was important for rapport. And he walked in and I had him. I just had him. I had him in seconds, and we got the money for the water plant. And when I then went, I was actually at Capgemini. I was working there on a project, one of my first projects when I went independent. And I introduced them to polish your shoes, and they absolutely loved it because it was like forensic preparation. So if you're going to do a pitch at Marks and Spencer's, guess what you should wear?
Marks and Spencer suit.
Yeah. And that was the level of,
Yeah.
and that's the sort of better. I mean, I've got loads. I can now tell loads. We can go on and on about this, but
Mm.
because that then it took our win rate at Atos up when I was at Atos. It took our win rate up from about 3 and 7 up to about 3 and 5.
That's impressive.
Now that's millions of pounds,
Mhm.
hundreds of millions of pounds. And all we did was listen to Jim and Jim's polish your shoes idea. So I
Polish
talk
your
about it all
shoes
the
is a
time.
wonderful,
Isn't it
wonderful
brilliant?
thing to soundbite to hang that on.
It is, and I mean, I
Did you
can't claim
polish your
ownership
shoes?
of it. Jim's
No, no.
retired now, so I've told him he's
Yeah.
handed that idea to me.
Oh, well, that's a good thing. He'll be glad. His legacy. Polish
His
your shoes.
legacy. He's a
Fantastic.
very dear man.
It's
and
good
taught me
advice.
a lot.
Mm.
Taught me a lot. So yeah, so sales. I think what's the hardest part for you?
Picking up to the phone to someone I don't know, particularly in these post-pandemic time, well, post-pandemic, mid, wherever we are in that process, mid-post. Yeah, picking up the phone, because everyone sort of has gone remote. A lot of people seem to have removed their phone numbers. So your only option, you need to get creative about how you think about how you're going to do that, what you're going to say. I think when I'm introduced, it's great. It's kind of like I'm off and running. I think I'm still getting over that thing of, if you pick up the phone and you say, "Hi, it's Paul from IBM or Capgemini or whoever," you go, "Oh yeah, okay." Whereas if you go, "Paul, it's Paul from whoever," they go, "Who?" Yeah. So you've got a bit of that. So it's doing that practice of, no doesn't mean it's personal. It's just like that. So I think that's the hardest bit. I actually enjoy. I got on my notice board here. Actually, I remember doing a piece of work I was chatting to one of the girls in IBM. She was the senior. She led the analytics business over in the States. And she said, "Well, what's your acronym for, if you took the word sales, what does that stand for?" I had to think about that. And I ended up writing it on the board, and it's here. I wish I could show you, but it says, S is for service to others. A is attentiveness. L is, this sounds a bit cheesy, and I know it might turn some people off, but lead clients from a place of love. Love them up. It's good. It worked for Alan Mullally at Ford's. His advice is always, love your people up. E is enhance my client in some way. So IBM always talked about, how do you champion your client, which I think was a really important. And then come up with, what are the shared outcomes? What does the client get from it? But also, what do you get from it? What does that help you do? So I try and remember that. I don't always get it right, as some of my current prospects will tell you. But
some of your non-clients will tell you.
Yes, some of my non-clients. Yes, sorry. But I think that's a useful guide for me to try and remember when people are turning around and going, "No," or "I don't want to speak to you," or "Not right now," and then forgetting who you are. It's kind of like, well, it just goes with the territory, and you develop a thick skin, and you find people around you to support you through that process. So that's that. How about you?
Well, there's probably two things you've just sparked in my mind. One was something very kind you did. I've obviously had some issues in the last couple of years because of various reasons, mainly because of my business falling apart, like many other people. And you called me out of the blue one day because you spotted something on LinkedIn, and I really appreciated that. And I think that sort of thing, it's quite odd, isn't it? We used to always call each other without having to plan it. You didn't have, "I'm going to call you at 18 minutes past 10 on Tuesday week."
I know.
It's weird, isn't it? I mean, I'd love to talk to I must talk to my son about this, because did they really never just call each other? "How you doing, mate? How you doing, darling? You all right?"
Crazy. Yeah.
It's weird. That's the first thing I would say to that. The second thing to that, I think the brand permission thing, which is what you were talking about there, "Hi, I'm Scott from KPMG." Yeah. "Hi, I'm Scott from Fujitsu." Oh yeah. They'll talk to you.
Yeah.
This is a hope. There's no evidence. So I'm taking my scientific cap off here. I hope that one of the outcomes from this last horrendous, you know, the sort of the AC rather than before COVID, the AC, is that link, the brand permission thing might diminish a little bit, because I've certainly learned in the last 2 years, and I think I've learned quite a lot about myself more than anything else, but that the brand thing isn't really that important. I mean, it's maybe it's the end of the big brand. Maybe it's, I mean, I'm going off on a speculative route here, but you know, are we witnessing the end of that classic brand permission thing because the brands are disappearing? And I don't know if that's true, but I'm sensing changes at the moment, Paul. That
I think it's interesting. You have to look at something like the Edelman Trust
Yeah.
Barometer, which I've been sort of tracking for 2 or 3 years now, because I find there's interesting data points that that help you try and triangulate what the hell is going on right now when everyone's trying to make sense of that. And it's talking about, you know, we've reached this point where everybody, the level of distrust is now a default setting.
Yeah.
For most things, you know, for public institutions, for education, for mainstream brands, that kind of thing. That's the going in point of view, and I think that's I mean, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
In that if you've got enough fake news, if you've got enough fake politicians, if you've got politicians breaking the law and then not being held to account, yeah, I don't want to go down that avenue particularly, but it does lead and fuel that default setting of distrust. So how do you overcome that? And I think it's that old thing of who goes first, you know. And there's an opportunity. I once heard a story. It was I don't know if it's true. I wish it was true. But they said, what if you could play Grand Theft Auto in reverse? What if instead of robbing and killing and vandalizing, you did the opposite? You were kind, you helped people, and you scored points that way, and you could actually reverse the game.
Love it.
So and I just thought, that's an interesting thought, because wouldn't it be great? You know, like you see silly little memes, like, you know, every time someone buys something from the small independent business, you know, they do it when they've gone out of the shop, they do a little happy dance around the till, and that's for real.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, yeah, as we move into this sense of having had the opportunity to reflect, we're now becoming more mindful about where we're spending our money, what we're spending our money on, why we're spending our money, and who can we support. So, you know, where are you buying your books? You know, have certain booksellers of a certain size got enough money? And what about the independents? You know,
Yes.
How do you do that?
Yes.
It's very easy just to go one click and sure enough it turns up tomorrow. But, you know, think of the happy dances that go on when you go, actually, I'm going to support my bookshop 3 miles away down the road and do that. So I think that I'm sort of losing my thread a bit, but
no, it's okay. I mean, it's like you've made me think of the sort of the ecosystem models that you see around now. You know, they're quite new in the business world, but of course, I mean, I studied biology and was a biologist for a few years, and you know, one of the things you learn in biology very early on, it's like a first year, you know, biology student thing you learn, is about, first of all, how we're all connected. And that's just a biological fact. That's not a made up thing or an idea or a philosophical thing. We are all connected from the lowest Hibs fan right up to the highest Hearts fan or whatever football teams you're into. But literally from the amoeba through to the, you know, to the highest, we're all connected. And of course, then we're all affected by the environment in which we're located. There's even an equation that you get in first year biology. It's like genotype plus environment equals phenotype, which is your genetics plus where you're located.
Yep.
It is expressed as your phenotype. The phenotype is your being, if you like, what you are. And I think I'm going to use the word hope. I hope that there will be some impact on what you've just said. I hope you're right. I mean, I don't know what you think. I mean, I saw a thing yesterday that, you know, that Alan Sugar character. who's become a bit of a caricature of himself, but he knows it. It's
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
That's not
he
a
has.
criticism. But he said something on LinkedIn or on the media about how nobody's listening. The reality is that they're all just skiving. They don't want to be in the office because they're scared of work, and he got a lot of abuse about that. That's naive. But do you know what? 2 years is not a long time, and change takes a hell of a long time.
It does.
It's not quite evolutionary, but it certainly takes a long time. And I think he's partly right. I think there will be a bounce one way, then it'll bounce back. I think because change just doesn't happen that quick. It doesn't, not across the world. It might happen in one company.
Hmm.
I don't know what you think of that, but maybe I'm being pessimistic, or I'm losing my hope, or my will to live. I don't know what I'm doing here, but I don't think we're suddenly going to be prancing around with ambrosia with unicorns, and I think a lot of people
Definitely not.
are imagining that. I'm going to go to work for one day a week, and I'm going to do all my work in my living room, and it's going to be wonderful, and I'm going to have 5 days off. No, it isn't going to be like that.
That's interesting because there's such a broad
It's
spectrum.
a huge, yeah.
I think there are people who are planning to do that. Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week,
Yeah.
for all its, once you sort of poke it a bit hard, you
Yeah,
kind
it's
of go,
not really a 4-hour work
it's
week."
not really a 4-hour work week. But great title to sell a book.
It is.
But that idea of being a nomad worker, for
Yeah.
certain types of roles, that's fine. But if you're in a factory, on a factory line, or you're in the front
Not
line,
going to stop, is it?
it's you're not going to work from home doing
Yeah.
brain surgery, are you?
No.
So I think it's interesting. What gives me hope is that people are talking about it, and that people are realizing that work is no longer it's an essential part of life. It is an essential part of life because it's part of who we are. We need it for the world to work. I mean, what, as you would say, what do we all do? Do we go back to being sort of village communities, growing our own veg, and in some ways that is the answer. But going from where we are to that, I'm always amused by people who say, "Yeah, what we need is this, and we need to do that." And you go, "Yeah, okay, we need to leave fossil fuels behind," and we do, in my humble opinion.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What are we going to do with all the people who work in that industry right now, and what we can do with their families, and how's that transition? And anyone who's been in a transformation environment where you're trying to take large numbers of people, get back to the consulting thing, it's like, well, guess what? They don't want to change.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely
hard.
right. And I mean,
it's really hard.
I mean, it's funny. One of my friends, my best friend, in fact, is on from Twitch, Andy there, and we both grew up in industrial Lanarkshire. And when they shut down the steelworks, my God, what an impact that had, Paul.
Mhm.
I mean, it has only just started to recover. That, and I mean, that's 30 years ago. And I think that certainly Thatcher never, and I'm sorry if that's a political statement, but she never thought about that. She was thinking about getting voted in for the next election, as all politicians do, because of the system. As you said earlier, I think it's the system that leads the behaviour.
Well, you do the behaviour that gets you the reward that you're after.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. And but I mean, I'm not for a second saying we shouldn't grasp this. And I think the thing I'm excited is similarly, I'm excited by, I had lunch with the chief executive of one of the, Cognizant, just the other day, and she was talking to me. She said, "I remember you talking about this stuff, and it was like 20 years ago." And I remember I think I told you this story. I might even have done it on this show before. But when my last job at British Gas, did I tell you the story about closing the social clubs?
No.
I don't know. No, my last job at British Gas was to go around the whole country and close down all the social clubs.
Right.
Because we'd come out, we were basically about to be destroyed by. I'm giving away my politics again, but I mean, nobody could think for a minute that privatisation of British Gas has been a good idea. I mean, the whole thing's a mess, expensive mess. And we all knew it was going to be a disaster. But one of the things, but forget that, that's the politics. But on a human level, we had the best place to work in Britain, with the best gas production service in Europe. We had the cheapest gas in the world. We had the best customer service in Europe. This was a world-class gas company. And okay, there was some inefficiencies, right? But it was good. And I got asked to close all these social clubs down, and I had no idea. Again, I was a youngster. I've closed them all down. There was thousands of people in tears, devastated, because their dad's dad had opened that social club, you know, and you're in, you know, the Black Country, and they have like a pub and a social club, and that's all they have in their village, you know. And I remember the worst one was Cardiff. Actually, I went down to Cardiff, and do you know what they did? They treated me like I was a god, and I was closing down their social club.
Wow.
Welcome to our social club. Thank you for coming. We're delighted to see you. And I closed it down. I'm getting goosebumps again, despite me telling it just 2 weeks ago. And now, guess what they're all thinking about doing? Opening social clubs, thinking about, you know. So it was obvious back then that we were ripping the heart out of our companies, and hopefully we're reversing some of that. So I'm hopeful. Don't know what that's got to do with sales, but it's kind of, you know.
Well, I read something over the weekend that said, you know, people are enjoying reconnecting. People are appreciating the value that brings, and are recognizing that it's part of our human condition to connect. And therefore, how we connect and why we connect is coming back into our consciousness. And it's like, once you've experienced it, it's like, oh yeah, I remember. It's like going back to the first gig. You know, the first gig that was almost like Holy Communion. We went to see Jules Holland on stage, and it was just brilliant, because the musicians had grins as wide as the stage, and we were all grinning, and there was this communion of music and energy that was just absolutely stunning to be part of. And you go, this is great. And I think people are finding that in the workplaces too, if they're honest. Now, do they want to be there 5 days a week? Why are we sat in an office doing this? Well, no. And as we said earlier, certain occupations don't allow for that.
Yes. So where do you think then sales could go? Because we're not meant to be talking about sales. As always, we go off.
We are, yeah.
But what do you think about that? Because to be absolutely honest, I don't know. You know, I mean, certainty is a bad trait anyway, so I must be doing okay, because I'm not certain at all. I'm clueless. But where do you think, between us, do you think we can guess how it might develop?
Well, my hope is it goes to where it should go, which is to serve. You know, serve then sell. I think the old models of, you know, trying to, I would hope, trying to string people over a barrel, or shoehorn things into things that don't need to be shoehorned, or, you know, walking 10 people into a room and saying, well, this is us, and this is how great we are, and this is how big we are, and, you know, all this, that, and the other. I think, I get a sense that's not what it's about. I think it's changing in the younger generations anyway. That isn't what it's about at all. And you need that inflow of money to create the oxygen to allow you to do what you want to do. So I think sales as creating the oxygen to do some good. Again, back to the Edelman Trust Barometer, they're saying, you know, so social purpose is the core of business.
Yes.
And I think if we gravitate towards that, then what is already a noble profession, because I really do believe it is done right, where you are serving, where you are trying to make things better by offering better things, then I think my sense there's a real opportunity to do that for those who don't do that already. So, you know, it's very easy to go, well, based on my history and experience and all my biases of seeing good and bad behavior in some of the largest organizations in the world, I'm tarred with a certain view. And I know there are other people that will view it differently. That goes, you know, serve. You know, if you look at someone like Rich Litvin and his view of the world is just keep serving.
Yes.
Just serve. And eventually, you know, someone will say, well, that was great. How do I work with you beyond that? And I really hope that's where it goes.
I wonder. I mean, I wonder. I mean, what's your sort of funniest sales story? I
was thinking about that, and you just triggered something that about 15 minutes ago, and I thought, oh, I need to confess this, because you have the LinkedIn profile where everybody, and it's gold plated, or it's certainly shiny. Mine isn't gold plated. It's got elements of shine to it, I like to think.
Got the odd twinkle.
Yes, the odd twinkle. So early on in my career, like you, not really knowing what I'm doing, I'm just about learning to wear a suit, if the truth be known.
Yeah.
And we were good. I was lucky. I was working with a guy who very, very successful, probably one of the best salespeople I've ever worked with, a Scot,
Of course.
a Glaswegian,
Of
although
course.
he lived in the country, in Hamilton, and where his family was from. But he was absolutely brilliant. Taught me so much, and we'd done the preparation thing. I mean, we had prepared. We had worked till the wee hours for a retailer to sell them as a marketing software system. That was my thing. That's the thing I really knew.
Right.
And I prepared this deck. It took me hours, and it was the old versions of PowerPoint. It wasn't like you've got artificial intelligence to present this, and it was easy to sort of
design for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. You did all that yourself. You grafted, and you positioned the lines and this, that, and the other. And I got this beautiful thing that took me hours. Anyway, client rocks up in the day, and the presentation's going, and there's about 10 of them in the audience, fairly senior, across the marketing department of this one of the famous UK retailers, and Paul's the account director at the time, and we did the presentation, and that sort of went well, but there were sort of puzzled looks on people's faces, and I was kind of like, and I was tired, and I was tetchy, and I was young, and I was stupid. And there was a lady in the group so any questions? And it was almost like the moment in the film Big, where Tom Hanks has listened to this presentation and he goes, I don't get it. And she, I can't remember exactly what she said, but she might as well have said, I don't get it. And I think I said something. I might as well have sworn and used some f bombs, because it was the equivalent of art. Because in the tone of voice and the look and my body language was clearly, what part of this don't you get? And in brackets, unspoken, you silly person. I have spent so long doing this. Well, I watched the colour drain out of Paul, because it was a good deal, and we'd worked hard. He got fantastic rapport with the client, and he said, well, maybe that's a good time for us to take a coffee break. And he sort of shot a look at me, and he went, and we walked outside, and of course I got the grilling I deserved.
Yes.
And he spent several weeks trying to rescue that particular faux pas. Now, the end of the story was there were a couple of other things that went on that I can't talk about, but I know about, that really could have swung the deal in completely the wrong way.
Oh dear.
But eventually he managed to pull the deal over the line, and we won it.
Yes.
It was like, but of all the things, it was like, what part of this don't you understand? So I think of the low points of my career, that's very, very close in selling.
Yeah.
Lots to learn from that, I think.
Yeah.
I've not done it again.
No, but I mean, I've made similar mistakes, because you get so close to something, don't you, that you feel you've just got
to knackered, and they don't.
Exhausted.
You don't appreciate the lengths they've gone to try and prepare, to try and do your best, because you really want to win it. You really want to serve them. You've got a solution that's really, really good.
Yes.
And they don't get it, and you go, well, that's because of this quality of the story you told. It wasn't good enough. Absolutely. It's like a teacher. Yeah. A teacher teaching you maths. If you don't get the maths, whose problem's that? Well, it's not the person being taught, is it?
Absolutely right. I mean, I'll bring us towards a close with this little one that builds. It's the opposite. So my best experience, probably, or one of my best experiences, certainly, with using story to sell. I was heading up a small but perfectly formed team called the Impact Team.
Good
And
name.
our job was to make an impact. We to help our bid teams and pitch teams to make an impact on clients. And I was brought into this massive, it was a £300 million deal with the post office. And there's all these sort of hairy-arsed technology guys. These guys, they live with spreadsheets and they're all kind of obsessed with technology. Ironically, they put them in charge of change programs. Anyway, that's another story.
That's a different story.
We may come back to, yeah. Then I went in and they're all looking at me, but they knew who I was, but they were kind of, oh God, here we go, Scott's in the room. And I said to them, okay, what does the post office do? And they looked at me like I was an idiot. What do you mean what the effing post office do? I said, no, tell me, what does the post office do? I was hamming it up a bit. But anyway, they eventually got around to saying, well, they deliver letters. I went, oh, great, well done. Tell me about letters. And they really were like, you could see their faces. They're all going, I wish this guy would just shut up and leave and let us get back to our spreadsheets. So eventually we got down to talking about when they used to get letters when they were kids, from their grandparents or from their mum and dad and all that. And I said, right, why don't we write the bid in ink? And you should have heard that it was magic. It was a tumbleweed moment. They're like, what is he talking about? Right. So I swear to God, we wrote a £300 million proposal. It was the final stage of that. So it wasn't it was a big thing, but not the great big thing. In ink, we got 2 calligraphers and we got some lovely paper, very expensive paper, and we wrote the bid. And then we got an artist who worked in the company to make an envelope. And we made a wax
seal. Nice.
And somebody dressed up as a post person and delivered the bloody thing.
Genius.
Right? We won the £300 million deal. Right? And I remember sitting in the pub with one of these aforementioned hairy-arsed technologists. And he said, you're all right. And I think that's the best feedback I've ever had.
That's pretty good feedback. Yeah.
He came out his cave, came into the pub and went, you're all right. And he was obviously Scottish. But that, and I tell that story, I'll tell that story tomorrow when I'm on my feet. And I tell it often because that to me is, Jim, if you're there, that is the ultimate polish your shoes, because it was just thinking about the client, thinking about how to serve them, understanding what they are all about, and then using that to make sure they understand what you're all about.
I think that's really important. And also the courage to do that.
Yeah.
One of the earliest examples I remember, you probably heard this story, was the Intercity bid that was done by an advertising agency. I've forgotten who did it.
Right.
But a very famous story. And what the agency did was they dressed up their reception. So for anyone who doesn't know, Intercity used to be I think they were nationalised, the rail service that used to have the relatively fast, and they were appalling. The trains were, beer stained seats and rubbish everywhere. The trains never ran on time. The stations were horrible with graffiti and all kinds of, chips all over, chip papers and meals half eaten. Anyway, this agency did exactly that. They invited the client team to come to the meeting, to the pitch, but they decorated the reception area of the agency as an Intercity waiting room. So it was exactly the same. There was drinks, half empty drinks, and all kinds of things. There were newspapers, and they kept them waiting. They said, "Oh, we're really sorry we're late. We just wanted you to know what it felt like to be a customer of yours." And they won the work.
What a
absolute genius! And my hope, I saw it done a couple of times when I was at IBM, and it was real genius, real courage to sort of. I remember one pitch done to a power company that was actually done as a musical number.
Really?
Of people walking through the building. Someone had written a song to a popular tune, and the whole team did it to camera, sang it, performed it. Client absolutely loved it because it was this big behemoth of a company that all of a sudden became very human, very relatable. And established a level of rapport that perhaps you can't do in right, I'd like to move to slide 22, please, and explain this diagram to you. people want fun. People want laughter in even in the C-suite. It's important. So take the risk. It's definitely worth it.
Do you know, Paul, with your permission, how about we talk about courage next week?
Hi.
Because that
Scottish and Newcastle courage, or something else.
well, we can talk about that as well. We do on my Friday night thing. We do that with Scottish and Newcastle products, but not in midday on a business thing.
Yeah,
but,
we don't want to encourage that.
No, but
courage.
Well,
certainly
not in the current climate.
No, definitely not
in the UK anyway. But listen, that has been fascinating. I hope everyone watching has enjoyed listening to us talking about story selling. I think, Paul, we could probably tell a lot more. I think we need to come back to this because we've only just given it a little scratch, really. And I mean, that's an hour. I think we need to come back because for a start, I want to hear your story about when you went a long way and nothing happened. I won't say anything else, but we need to get that in. And there's 2 or 3 other ones I'd like to tell about, like the secret police in Hong Kong that I've got that I can tell, but let's leave them hanging on that. But so let's think about courage next week, because I think there's a lot of that. I mean, Brené Brown, etc., are all over it. Let's explore courage next week. I think that would be a really interesting topic. We do have guests coming in quite soon, guys, but there's still a couple of weeks before we have guests again. So Paul and I can go organic. Are you okay with that? Do you think that's an interesting topic, isn't it?
I think it's something that people would be interested to. And if you want to join the conversation, then please do contribute via chat. We'd love to have comments as we go. And it's we'll do our best to think about courage from a number of different angles.
Yeah. So thank you very much for tuning in to Artefact Live with me, Scott MacArthur.
And me, Paul Crick.
And cannot wait to chat to you all again next week. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.